I want you to picture a little girl. She's 8 years old, her name is Sophie, and right now she's standing on a stage wearing angel wings that are slightly too big for her small frame. A golden halo sits crooked on her head, the way halos always sit on real children, not quite perfect, not quite straight. Christmas lights twinkle behind her, casting her shadow long across the wooden floor. She's scanning the audience, row by row, face by face. Hundreds of people have come to watch the school holiday pageant. Parents with cameras, grandparents beaming with pride, siblings fidgeting in their seats. The auditorium smells like perfume and winter coats, and that specific kind of anticipation that only happens at children's performances. And Sophie is searching, desperately, frantically searching, for the one face that matters more than all the others combined. Her mother's face. Do you see her? Can you see this child standing there in her moment of glory, in her white dress and golden wings, looking for her mom? Her eyes move across the crowd, past Mrs. Henderson from next door, past her best friend Emma's parents, both of them sitting together, holding hands, past her grandmother who's been there for every single performance, bless her heart, wiping tears of pride from her eyes. But Grandma isn't Mom. Sophie's lines are coming up. She knows them by heart. She's practiced them 1,000 times in front of the mirror, in the car, at the dinner table, while brushing her teeth. She's ready. She's been ready for months. But her voice is starting to shake. Because the seat that should hold her mother, the seat Sophie asked the teacher to reserve, the seat with the best view of center stage, sits empty. Again. For the third Christmas in a row, and something inside this 8-year-old child, something innocent and trusting and hopeful, something that still believed maybe this year would be different, breaks. You can actually see it happen. If you were there in that audience, you'd see the exact moment. The way her shoulders drop, the way her smile falters, the way her eyes stop searching and just go dim. It's the moment when a little girl stops believing that her mother will ever choose her over work. Now, what if I told you that child's mother, Rachel Martinez, is sitting in an office building 12 miles away at this exact moment? What if I told you she's staring at her computer screen through tears that won't stop falling, looking at completed project reports, knowing that every single deadline has been met, every goal exceeded, every client satisfied? What if I told you she's been told she cannot leave, that if she walks out that door to see her daughter shine, she'll lose her job, lose her health insurance, lose her ability to pay rent, lose everything? That she has to choose right now, tonight, between watching her baby perform and keeping a roof over both their heads? What if I told you this choice, this impossible, cruel, soul-destroying choice isn't unusual, that it's not rare, that it's not even uncommon, that right now, this very second as you listen to these words, millions of people around the world are being forced to make this exact same choice? A father in Chicago missing his own father's last Christmas because his boss threatened his job? A sister in Atlanta being erased from her sibling's wedding because a corporation decided quarterly profits matter more than once-in-a-lifetime family bonds? A young graduate in Seattle spending his first Christmas completely alone in an empty apartment, crying into takeout food, wondering if this hollow, aching loneliness is what the rest of his life will look like? And what if I told you something even worse? What if I told you most of these crises demanding these sacrifices are manufactured? That the numbers don't actually require it? That the work could wait? That it's done simply because companies can do it? Because we've been conditioned to accept it? Because we've normalized the exploitation of human beings and dressed it up in the language of professionalism and dedication and team player? What if I told you 12 people decided enough was enough, that they documented everything, risked everything, stood together when standing seemed impossible, and took back what had been stolen from them? This is their story. This is the story of Rachel Martinez, James Okafa, Priya Sharma, David Chen, and 8 others whose names you'll come to know. This is the story of the Christmas that almost never came, and this is the story of how they reclaimed it. So settle in, because what you're about to hear might make you angry. It might make you cry. It might make you see your own life in ways you've been avoiding. But most importantly, it might give you the courage to stand up when your moment comes. Let's begin. December 1st, Summit Solutions Corporate Headquarters, 9:47 a.m. The office looked like any modern corporate workplace. Open floor plan with rows of desks, glass-walled conference rooms, a sad little break room with a coffee maker that never quite worked right, and motivational posters on the walls that said things like, "Teamwork makes the dream work," and "Excellence is our standard." You know the type. You've probably worked in one. Rachel Martinez sat at her desk, surrounded by the evidence of her excellence. And there was a lot of evidence. 37 completed projects in the past quarter alone. Client satisfaction scores averaging 4.8 out of 5. Revenue generation, 14% above target. Her team had never been more productive. By any objective measure, Rachel was exceptional at her job. She was also dying inside. Rachel was 35 years old and she looked 50. The dark circles under her eyes had their own dark circles. Her hands trembled slightly. Too much coffee, too little sleep, too many stress hormones flooding her system day after day after day. She kept a bottle of antacids in her desk drawer like other people kept candy. Her doctor had warned her about stress-related health problems. Rachel had nodded, thanked the doctor, and continued working 80-hour weeks, because what choice did she have? She had a daughter to support, rent to pay, benefits to maintain. No partner to split expenses with, no trust fund to fall back on, no safety net of any kind. Just her, Sophie, and this job that was slowly killing her. On Rachel's desk sat a framed photo. 8-year-old Sophie from last year's school play, dressed as a reindeer, beaming at the camera with joy that only children can manage. Complete, uncomplicated, pure. Rachel had missed that performance. She'd been at the office working through a crisis that turned out not to be a crisis at all. The year before that, Sophie had been a snowflake in the winter pageant. Rachel missed that one too. Another emergency that mysteriously resolved itself by January without her presence being remotely necessary. 3 years of Christmases stolen by what management called closing quarter crunches. But this year was supposed to be different. Sophie had the lead role, the angel, the one who stands center stage and delivers the message of hope and joy to a weary world. Sophie had been practicing for 4 months. Every single night, she'd put on her wings and her crooked halo and perform her lines, her solo, her movements. She'd memorized every word, every note, every gesture. She'd made Rachel promise, really promise, not just the empty promises of years past, that she'd be there. She'd circled it on every calendar. December 24th, 7 p.m., Sophie's holiday pageant. Lead role, cannot miss. She'd requested the time off in August, 5 months of advance notice, more than enough for any reasonable workplace. It had been approved. She'd gotten the confirmation email. She'd shown it to Sophie, who'd squealed with joy and hugged her so tight Rachel could barely breathe. For the first time in 3 years, Rachel had allowed herself to believe it would actually happen this time. She should have known better. Nearby, James Okafor was video chatting with his parents in Lagos, Nigeria. At 78 and 76 years old, his parents were running out of Christmases. This was just mathematical reality, the kind that keeps you up at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, calculating how many more holidays you might have left with the people who gave you life. His father had been diagnosed with congestive heart failure last spring. The doctors had been diplomatic about the prognosis, using phrases like unpredictable progression and quality of life focus, which James understood to mean, We don't know how much time he has, but it's measured in months or years, not decades. His mother's arthritis had progressed to the point where she could barely walk some days. She didn't complain. She never complained, but James could hear the pain in her voice during their weekly calls. The way she'd pause mid-sentence when she had to move. The way she'd laugh it off when he asked if she was okay. James hadn't seen them in person in 3 years. 3 years of essential crunch time. 3 years of approved vacation requests that got canceled at the last minute. 3 years of empty promises and tickets wasted and empty seats at the family table. Last Christmas, when he'd called to tell them he couldn't come home again, his mother had cried. She tried to hide it, but James heard the catch in her voice, the muffled sound of tears she didn't want him to hear. His father had simply said, "We understand, son. Work is important." But James heard what his father didn't say. "We won't be here forever. One day you'll come home and they'll be gone, and you'll have to live with the fact that you chose work over us." This year, James had purchased non-refundable tickets in June. He'd cleared it with management months in advance. He'd handed off every single responsibility to colleagues. He'd written detailed transition documents. He'd done everything right, everything by the book. His bags were packed and sitting in his closet at home. In 23 days, he would board a plane to Lagos. He would hug his parents, actually physically hold them for the first time in 3 years. He would sit with them. He would be present. He would be there before it was too late. That was the plan. Across the office, Priya Sharma stared at her phone, scrolling through photos of her sister's wedding preparations. The venue decorated in marigolds and jasmine, orange and gold, the colors of celebration and joy. The intricate mehndi designs that would cover her sister's hands and feet. The traditional red and gold sari that had been in their family for 3 generations, now altered to fit her sister perfectly, carrying the weight of history and hope into this new beginning. Priya was the maid of honor. She'd been her sister's best friend since they were children, sharing a bedroom, braiding each other's hair, telling each other secrets. They'd promised each other, back when they were teenagers, that when their wedding days came, they'd be there for every single moment. No exceptions, no matter what. Her sister's ceremony would take place over 3 days of traditional celebrations, December 27th through 29th. 3 days of rituals and music and family, and the kind of joy that only comes when people who love each other gather to witness a new chapter beginning. Priya had requested the time off a year in advance. She'd booked her flight. She'd spent $2,000 on her outfit, money she didn't really have but paid anyway because this was her sister, her best friend, her person. Her sister called her every night to talk about the plans, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Only 26 more days, Priya! Can you believe it? You're going to be right there beside me." Priya could believe it. She lived for it. She counted the days down. She'd already mentally blocked out the time, which ceremony she'd help prepare for, which traditional rituals she'd participate in, which aunties she'd need to greet, which cousins she'd catch up with. She could see it all in her mind so clearly. And then there was David, Chen, 24 years old, fresh out of college. His first real job, his first year away from home. David sat in his cubicle fighting back tears as he looked at the texts from his mother. "Dad and I are so excited for you to come home, honey. It's been so long. I'm making all your favorites for Christmas dinner. Your grandma's pot roast recipe, the mashed potatoes you love, my special green bean casserole. Only a few more weeks. We miss you so much." This was David's first Christmas away from his childhood home, his first year navigating the real world, paying rent, doing his own laundry, figuring out how to be an adult. It had been harder than he'd expected, lonelier, scarier. He'd been promised that interns would have holiday time off. "We're a family here," the recruiter had said with a warm smile during his interview. "We believe in work-life balance. We take care of our people." David had believed them. He'd believed them because he was 24 and optimistic and hadn't yet learned that corporations lie as easily as they breathe. At 9:52 a.m., every computer screen in the office lit up simultaneously. A meeting notification appeared with the ominous chime of a death knell, that distinctive sound that makes your stomach drop because you just know that nothing good comes from surprise mandatory meetings. Rachel's stomach dropped. She knew that notification. She'd seen it before, every December for the past 5 years, like clockwork, like a predator that returns to the same hunting ground year after year because the prey never learns to run, never learns to fight, just stands there frozen and accepts the inevitable. Around the office, faces fell. Shoulders slumped. Someone whispered, "No, not again. Please, not again. They promised this year would be different." They had promised. They stood in front of the whole company back in January and said, "We hear you. We know last year was hard. We're making changes. We're prioritizing work-life balance. We're committed to respecting your personal time." They had promised. Lies are easier to tell when you never face consequences for telling them. Within 3 minutes, 87 employees packed into a conference room designed for 60. People stood against walls, sat on the floor, crowded in the doorway like sardines in a can. The air conditioning couldn't keep up with all the body heat and anxiety. The temperature rose along with the collective sense of dread that pressed down on everyone like a physical weight. At the front of the room stood Richard Sterling, CEO, 55 years old, impeccably dressed in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, wearing a smile that had been practiced in front of a mirror until it looked almost genuine. Almost. But if you looked closely, really looked, you could see it didn't reach his eyes. Those eyes were calculating, assessing, measuring exactly how much he could take from the people in front of him. Beside him stood Margaret Walsh, CFO, 50 years old with her arms crossed over her chest, her expression carved from ice and corporate spreadsheets. She looked at the assembled employees the way someone might look at numbers on a balance sheet. Assets and liabilities, costs and benefits. Nothing human at all. Rachel sat in the back row, arms crossed defensively, jaw clenched so tight it ached. James slumped in his chair, already defeated because he knew what was coming. Priya and David stood against the wall, young and hopeful and about to have that hope shattered. "Good morning, Summit family." Family. He actually used that word, as if families do this to each other, as if calling employees family makes it okay to exploit them. "I want to start by thanking you all for your incredible work this year. We've had our best quarter in company history. Client retention is up 23%. Revenue is up 31%. Our stock price has increased 32%, which is absolutely phenomenal in this market." Scattered, unenthusiastic applause. The kind of applause you give when you know you're supposed to, but your heart isn't in it. "But," Richard continued, his smile never wavering, practiced and plastic and permanent, "we have an opportunity here. Our investors believe, and I agree with them, that we can push even higher. We have a chance to close Q4 not just strong, but legendary, to set records that will define this company for years to come, to really cement our position as industry leaders." Margaret stepped forward, her voice cold and clinical. "Which is why, effective immediately, all previously approved time off requests for December are rescinded. We'll be operating at full capacity through January 2nd. All hands on deck, no exceptions." The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then, chaos. "You can't do this. My time off was approved 6 months ago. This is the 5th year in a row. I have a wedding. My father is dying. I have a non-refundable ticket. My kids are expecting me." Voices rising, overlapping, desperate and angry and scared all at once. 87 people who just had their holidays stolen, their plans destroyed, their families disappointed. Again. Richard raised his hands like a benevolent king, calming his subjects, still smiling that terrible smile. "I understand this is disappointing. I know you had plans. Believe me, we wrestled with this decision. But this is what separates mediocre companies from great ones. Sacrifice, commitment, excellence, going above and beyond when it matters most." An employee in the back, Tom from accounting, father of three, good guy who always brought donuts on Fridays, shouted loud enough to cut through the noise. You're taking a vacation. Your flight to Aspen is public record on the company calendar. We can all see it. Margaret's face hardened like concrete. Executive leadership has different responsibilities and therefore different needs. We've earned our positions through years of dedication and sacrifice. When you reach our level, you'll understand that the rules are different up here. The hypocrisy hung in the air like tear gas, burning everyone's eyes, making it hard to breathe. These executives, these people preaching sacrifice and commitment, had both already booked their Christmas vacations. Margaret to Aspen for skiing and spa treatments, Richard to the Bahamas with his family. 2 weeks each, 5-star resorts, while telling everyone else that Christmas was canceled. Priya stood up, her voice shaking with emotion. My sister is getting married December 28th. I'm the maid of honor. I've had this time off approved for a year. A full year. You knew about this. Richard's smile faltered for just a moment before sliding back into place. Priya, I'm sure your sister will understand. Family events happen all the time. Weddings especially. There's always another cousin getting married, another ceremony to attend. You'll have other opportunities. Other opportunities? Priya cracked. She's getting married once. This isn't a birthday party I can catch next year. This is her wedding. Margaret snapped, her patience clearly gone. That's enough. The discussion is closed. The decision has been made at the executive level, and it's final. James stood up slowly, drawing everyone's attention. When he spoke, his voice was tight with controlled fury, years of anger compressed into careful words. My father has congestive heart failure. The doctor said he has maybe a year left. Maybe. That's not guaranteed. It's maybe. I haven't seen my parents in 3 years because of this exact meeting, these exact words, these exact lies. Richard's expression didn't change, not a flicker of empathy. I'm sorry to hear about your father, James, truly. But we all face difficult personal situations. That's part of life. Part of being a professional is managing those situations around our work commitments, not the other way around. The room erupted. This is insane. How is this legal? I have a family. My kids are going to hate me. This can't be happening again. Margaret's voice cut through the noise like a knife through butter, sharp and cold. Let me be absolutely clear so there's no misunderstanding. Anyone who is unwilling to meet this commitment should speak to HR today. We will accept your resignation effective immediately and wish you well in your future endeavors. The threat silenced the room instantly, completely, because everyone heard what she was really saying. Comply or starve. Submit or lose everything. We own you. And for most people in that room, people with mortgages and car payments and children and medical bills and student loans and all the 1,000 financial chains that bind us to jobs we hate, that threat was enough. They would comply because they had no choice, because that's how this system works, because the people with power understand that desperation is the most effective management tool ever invented. Richard's smile returned, warm and reassuring, like a snake that swallowed its prey and is now digesting. We're not asking you to skip Christmas entirely. We're asking you to postpone it for a few days. Work December 24th and 25th. Take the 26th off if you'd like. It's a reasonable accommodation. Most clients won't even be working. You'll probably have quiet days to catch up on administrative tasks. Rachel stood up slowly. Every eye in the room turned to her. She'd been sitting there, silent, jaw clenched, fists tight, rage building like pressure in a closed container. When she spoke, her voice didn't shake. Years of suppressed fury had forged it into steel. My 8-year-old daughter has the lead role in her school Christmas pageant. It's on December 24th at 7 p.m. She's been practicing for 4 months. Every single night for 4 months. She knows every word, every note, every movement. I've missed the last 3 Christmases because of this exact meeting, these exact words, these exact lies. She paused, letting that sink in. Last week, Sophie asked me if the reason I'm never home for Christmas is because Santa put me on the naughty list. She asked if I don't love me anymore. Several employees in the room were crying now, actual tears streaming down faces, because every parent in that room understood exactly what Rachel was describing, that specific type of heartbreak that only comes from disappointing your own child over and over again until they stop expecting anything from you. Rachel continued, her voice finally cracking. I told her I love her more than anything in the world, more than anything. And she looked at me, and I will never, never forget the look in her eyes. And she said, then why do you always pick work instead of me? She's 8 years old and already learning that love is measured in presence, that words mean nothing without action, that promises broken enough times become lies, that the people who say they love you will choose other things over you again and again until you stop believing they ever loved you. What kind of lesson was that to teach a child? What kind of scar was that to carve into a young heart? Rachel continued, her voice finally cracking. I told her I love her more than anything in the world, more than anything. And she looked at me, and I will never, never forget the look in her eyes. And she said, then why do you always pick work instead of me? She's 8 years old, and she thinks she's less important than a spreadsheet. She thinks her mother doesn't love her enough to show up. She's learning that love is just empty words without action, that promises don't mean anything, that the people who are supposed to protect you will choose money over you every single time. The silence in the room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Even Richard looked uncomfortable for a moment. Just a moment before his corporate armor snapped back into place. Rachel, you're a talented project manager with a bright future here at Summit Solutions. Don't throw that away over one evening. Your daughter will have many more performances, many more Christmases. This opportunity, this Q4 push, comes once. Make the right choice. Rachel stared at him. She'll have many more performances? She's 8 years old. In 10 years, she'll be 18 and gone to college. In 20 years, she'll have her own life, maybe her own children. How many more chances do you think I have to be her mother, to be there when she needs me, to show her that she matters? Richard's jaw tightened. His smile was completely gone now. I think we're done here. Anyone who has concerns about this policy can speak to HR. Everyone else, back to work. We have a quarter to close and a reputation to maintain. People filed out in silence, defeated, trapped, hopeless. Shoulders slumped, eyes down, the shuffle of people who've just been told that their lives don't matter, that their families don't matter, that nothing matters except shareholder value and quarterly earnings. Rachel remained standing, fists clenched at her sides, watching Richard and Margaret pack up their presentation materials. Margaret checked her phone and smiled at whatever she saw there. Probably a confirmation for her Aspen ski resort or her spa reservation or some other luxury that her stolen Christmas vacation would provide. In that moment, watching these people who had everything deny her the ability to watch her daughter perform, something crystallized in Rachel's mind. A decision that had been building for 3 years, held back by fear and financial necessity, and the desperate hope that things might change on their own if she just worked hard enough, performed well enough, sacrificed enough. They wouldn't change on their own. Nothing ever does. Systems of exploitation don't reform themselves. People in power don't voluntarily give it up. Change requires force, requires courage, requires someone being willing to stand up even when standing up seems impossible. And Rachel was done waiting for someone else to be that person. That evening, Rachel arrived home at 11:43 p.m., nearly midnight. Another 16-hour day. Another evening missing dinner with Sophie. Another night of exhaustion so complete it felt like drowning. The house was dark, except for a small lamp in the living room that Rachel always left on so the house wouldn't feel so empty when she came home to a sleeping child, night after night after night. Sophie had left her angel costume draped over a chair in the living room. The white dress with its sparkles, the golden wings still attached, slightly bent from being worn so many times. The halo sitting crooked, just like it always sat on Sophie's head. There was a note on the kitchen table. Written in Sophie's careful, 8-year-old handwriting, each letter formed with the kind of concentration only children bring to writing. Some letters were backwards, some were wobbly, but every word was clear. Dear Mommy, I practiced my lines for you tonight. I'll show you tomorrow if you want. I love you even though you're always at work. You probably don't have time, but if you do, I'll show you. Love, Sophie. P.S. Do you still love me? Rachel sat down at that kitchen table. She read that note once, twice, 7 times total, each reading like a knife to the heart. Do you still love me? 8 years old. 8, and already learning that love is measured in presence, that words mean nothing without action, that promises broken enough times become lies, that the people who say they love you will choose other things over you again and again until you stop believing they ever loved you at all. What kind of lesson was that to teach a child? What kind of scar was that to carve into a young heart? Rachel pulled out her laptop, she opened the shared drive and pulled up the Q4 reports. Every project, every deadline, every deliverable, every metric that management claimed they were behind on, that they claimed required this emergency crunch, that they claimed justified stealing Christmas from 87 people. She spent 3 hours going through them, line by line, number by number, project by project. And then she found it. The truth she'd suspected but never confirmed. They were ahead of schedule on every single project. Every single one. Not behind, not struggling, not facing any crisis at all. Ahead by an average of 2 weeks. Client satisfaction scores, 96%, higher than they'd ever been. Revenue targets exceeded by 14%, best performance in company history. Project completion rate, 100% on time or early delivery for the past 6 months. There was no crisis. There was no emergency. There was no business justification for canceling Christmas. It was manufactured, fabricated, a complete lie. A test of control, an assertion of power, a tradition of cruelty disguised as dedication and dressed up in the language of business necessity. They were stealing Christmas not because they needed to, because they could, because they'd done it for 5 years running and no one had ever stopped them, because they'd learned that if you threaten people's livelihoods, they'll accept any abuse, swallow any indignity, sacrifice anything, including their own children. Rachel opened a new document. She started typing. For the next 4 hours, until 3:47 in the morning, in a quiet kitchen with her daughter's heartbreaking note on the table and her laptop glowing in the darkness, Rachel Martinez compiled everything. 47 pages of documentation, 47 pages of proof, project completion reports showing everything was done early, client emails praising their work, requesting contract extensions, performance metrics showing record high productivity, revenue data showing they'd exceeded every target, satisfaction scores showing employees and clients were both happy with the work being delivered. Everything they would need to prove that this emergency was a lie. Then she opened her phone and sent 4 text messages. Her hands were shaking. This was the point of no return. Once she sent these messages, she was committed to a path that could cost her everything. To James, "Are you awake? We need to talk. It's urgent." To Priya, "Coffee tomorrow morning before work, 6 a.m. I have something important to show you." To David, "I know you're scared, so am I, but I have an idea. Will you hear me out? And to all three of them together in a group chat, they're lying to us. I have proof, hard proof, and I think I know what we can do about it. She stared at her phone screen, her finger hovering over the send button. If she sent these messages, she was starting something she couldn't stop. A revolution, an uprising, a direct challenge to power. She could lose everything. Her job, her income, her health insurance, her ability to pay rent and buy food and take care of Sophie. Everything. But she looked at Sophie's note again. Do you still love me? And Rachel realized she was going to lose Sophie anyway if this continued. Maybe not physically, but she'd lose her daughter's trust, her respect, her belief that her mother loved her. She'd lose all the moments that make up a childhood, all the memories that Sophie would carry for the rest of her life. She'd lose what actually mattered. And if she was going to lose something, she'd rather lose the job than her child. Rachel hit send. Within 2 minutes, all three responded. James, I'm in. Whatever it is, I'm in. Priya, I'll be there, 6 a.m. sharp. Tell me everything. David, I know you're scared, so am I, but I have an idea. Will you hear me out? And in that moment, at 3:51 a.m. on December 2nd, in a quiet kitchen with her daughter's heartbreaking note on the table and her laptop glowing in the darkness, Rachel Martinez started a revolution. She didn't know if it would work. She didn't know if they'd win. She didn't know if she'd still have a job by the end of the month. But she knew with absolute certainty that she was done sacrificing her humanity for a company that saw her as a resource to be exploited. She was done choosing work over Sophie. She was done being afraid. And she wasn't alone. December 15th, 2:17 a.m. The Summit Solutions break room had become a war room. Rachel sat at a table covered in printed documents, her laptop open and glowing in the fluorescent light, 3 empty coffee cups beside her like casualties of war. The dark circles under her eyes had become permanent features of her face, carved there by weeks of sleepless nights and mounting stress. She looked haunted. She looked determined. She looked like someone with nothing left to lose. And sometimes, people with nothing left to lose are the most dangerous people in the world. James entered first, moving slowly like a man much older than 42. He carried a bottle of prescription antacids that he'd been taking like candy for the past 2 weeks. His doctor had warned him about stress-related ulcers, had shown him concerning test results, had used words like cardiovascular risk and burnout syndrome. James had nodded, thanked the doctor, scheduled a follow-up he knew he wouldn't make, and continued working 80-hour weeks. Because what choice did he have? Can't sleep? He asked, his voice rough from exhaustion. Rachel laughed bitterly, a sound like breaking glass. Sleep is for people who aren't watching their lives fall apart in real time. James sat down heavily in a plastic chair that creaked under his weight. My mother called today. His voice cracked immediately. My father collapsed yesterday. They took him to the hospital. Dehydration, weakness, the stress on his heart. He was unconscious for 6 minutes. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed his hand. James, I'm so sorry. She said. James had to stop, compose himself, wipe his eyes. She said, don't worry, we know you can't come. We know work is important. We understand. Like she's already accepted that her son won't be there when his father dies. Like that's just normal now. His voice rose with anguish. I'm 42 years old, Rachel. I haven't hugged my parents in 3 years. I haven't sat at their table. I haven't heard my father's laugh in person. I watch them through a phone screen, and they're getting older every day, and I'm missing all of it. What kind of life is this? What kind of son am I? Rachel's voice was firm. You're a son trapped in an impossible situation created by people who see you as a resource, not a human being. This isn't your fault. Isn't it? I keep choosing to stay. I keep accepting it. Because they've made the alternative unthinkable. That's how exploitation works. They don't chain you to your desk, they just make sure you can't imagine any other option. Before James could respond, Priya entered. And if James looked bad, Priya looked devastated. Her face was blotchy from crying, mascara smeared down her cheeks in tracks she hadn't bothered to wipe away. Her eyes were red and swollen. She clutched her phone like it was the only solid thing in a world that had turned liquid and unstable. She didn't say anything at first, just sat down and stared at the table. Rachel waited, giving her space. Finally, Priya spoke, her voice hollow and emptied of all its usual brightness. My sister called an hour ago. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She looked up and her eyes were devastated. She asked me to step down as maid of honor. She said... Priya broke completely. She said, "It's okay, Priya. I understand. I know your job is important. But I need someone who can actually be there for the ceremonies, for the preparations, for everything. I need someone who won't let me down." Tears streamed down Priya's face. My own sister thinks I'm choosing this. She thinks I'm picking work over her wedding. She doesn't understand that I don't have a choice. Or maybe I do have a choice, and I'm just too much of a coward to make it. She wiped her eyes roughly. She said she still loves me. She said she's not angry, just disappointed. And somehow, that's worse. I'd rather she yell at me. I'd rather she hate me, because this quiet acceptance that I'll always let her down, that's unbearable. Priya put her head down on the table. I'm losing my sister over a job that doesn't even care if I exist. They could replace me tomorrow and not miss a beat. But my sister? She only gets married once, and I'm not going to be there. I'm going to miss it because I'm too afraid to stand up for myself. David was the last to arrive, looking young and lost and terrified. His eyes were red, too. Everyone's eyes were red these days, it seemed. Chronic exhaustion and suppressed tears would do that. My mom stopped texting me about Christmas, David said quietly as he sat down. She just sent me one message today. It said, "We understand, honey. Don't worry about us. Focus on your job. We're proud of you anyway." He laughed bitterly. Proud of me? For what? For choosing a paycheck over them? For becoming exactly the kind of person I never wanted to be? I'm 24 years old, and I'm already learning all the wrong lessons. For a moment, the four of them just existed in their collective misery. Four people who'd worked hard, played by the rules, done everything right, and were being destroyed by a system that rewarded their excellence with exploitation. Then, Rachel opened her laptop. "I want to show you something." She turned the screen so they could all see. Spreadsheets, charts, data visualizations, completion rates, client feedback scores, revenue projections, page after page of irrefutable evidence. This is our actual performance data for Q4. Every project, every metric, every target, every single deliverable. She scrolled through slowly, letting them see. Green check marks everywhere, completion rates at 100%, client satisfaction scores averaging 96%, revenue exceeding targets by 14%. We are ahead of schedule on 100% of our projects. Not behind, not struggling, not facing any deadline crunch. Ahead. James leaned forward, studying the numbers with the practiced eye of an analyst. His face changed as understanding dawned. Shock first, then disbelief, then pure rage. This can't be right. It is right. I pulled it directly from our own reporting systems, the same systems that Richard and Margaret have access to. They know these numbers. They've seen these reports. Then why? Because they can, Rachel said simply. Because we let them. Because every year they manufacture a crisis that doesn't exist, and every year we accept it, and every year they get away with it. There are no consequences for lying to us, so why would they stop? She pulled up another document, this one even more damning. She went back 5 years. Every year. The same pattern. Targets met or exceeded by mid-November, Christmas canceled in early December, bonuses promised in February that never materialize at the level suggested, and half the people who worked the holiday crunch get laid off in January anyway. Priya stared at the screen, and something was changing in her face. The grief was still there, but now it was hardening into rage. They've been lying to us for 5 years. Yes. My sister is losing her maid of honor because of a lie. Yes. James's father? She looked at James. You're missing possibly your father's last Christmas because they're lying. James' hands clenched into fists. They're stealing our lives. Yes, Rachel said. They're stealing our lives, our time, our families, our health, our sanity, and they're doing it deliberately, consciously, with full knowledge that it's unnecessary. David's voice was small, young, bewildered. But why? If the work is done, if we've met all the targets, why keep us here? Rachel looked at the young man with something like sympathy. Control, David. Power, the assertion of dominance. They do it because they can, and because keeping us desperate and exhausted makes us easier to control. If we're too tired to think, too scared to push back, too isolated to organize, we'll accept anything. We become perfect employees, productive, compliant, grateful for scraps. She leaned back, her voice weary but certain. It's not about the work. It never was. It's about breaking us down until we forget we're human beings with rights and dignity, until we accept that our lives belong to them. Pause, letting the truth settle. James spoke quietly, but his voice had steel in it now. What do we do? Rachel looked at each of them in turn. These 3 people who'd become her unlikely allies in the middle of the night, bonded that shared suffering and rage and the desperate need for something to change. We finish our work, we document everything, and I mean everything, every completed project, every exceeded target, every satisfied client. We make it impossible for them to claim we abandoned our responsibilities or failed to meet our obligations. And then? And then, on December 24th, we go home to our families. We leave. We be where we're supposed to be. The silence that followed was heavy with implication and fear and possibility. David's voice shook. They'll fire us. They'll blacklist us. They'll destroy our careers. Maybe, Rachel acknowledged. Probably even. But, David, you asked earlier if this is normal. It's not, and the only way it changes is if we stop accepting it, if we stand up and say no, even when saying no is terrifying. James sat up straighter, years of submission and fear falling away from his shoulders like a shed coat. I'm 42 years old. My father might not survive until next Christmas. The doctors were clear about that. And if he dies while I'm sitting in this office pretending to work on projects that are already finished, I'll never forgive myself. Never. His voice broke completely, tears streaming down his face. I'd rather lose this job than lose my last chance to hold my father. I'd rather be unemployed than be the son who wasn't there at the end. He looked at Rachel with absolute certainty. I'm in. Whatever the consequences, I'm in. Priya wiped her eyes, and when she spoke, there was strength in her voice that hadn't been there before. My sister will get married once. She'll have children once. She'll build her entire life once. And if I'm not there for the beginning of it because I was too afraid of losing a job at a company that treats me like this, she shook her head firmly. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not sacrificing her for them. I'm not teaching her that corporations matter more than family. I'm in. All eyes turned to David. The 24-year-old intern looked terrified. He was shaking slightly, his hands gripping the edge of the table. This is my first real job. I have $50,000 in student loans. I have rent due every month. I have nothing. No savings, no backup plan, no safety net. I'm one paycheck away from being homeless. Rachel's voice was gentle. I know, and if you can't do this, David, we understand. We won't judge you. We won't think less of you. Survival in a broken system isn't failure, it's survival. David stared at his hands for a long moment. When he looked up, there was something fierce in his young face that hadn't been there before. My parents told me something before I took this job. They said, remember who you are. Remember what matters. Don't let them turn you into someone who values money over people. And I promised I wouldn't. His voice grew stronger. But that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm becoming the kind of person who abandons his family for a corporation that doesn't care if I live or die. I'm 24 years old, and I'm already learning all the wrong lessons. He straightened his shoulders. If I accept this now, if I let them do this to me at 24, what will I accept at 34? At 44? When does it stop? He looked at Rachel. I'm in. I'm terrified, but I'm in. Rachel felt something shift in her chest. Hope, maybe, or purpose, or the simple, powerful recognition that they weren't alone, that resistance was possible, that four people saying no together was stronger than one person saying no alone. Okay, she said, her voice steady and certain. Then here's exactly what we do. Over the next 8 days, December 16th through December 23rd, they worked with renewed purpose and laser focus. But now they weren't working for Summit Solutions. They were working for themselves, for their families, for their freedom. Rachel created comprehensive handoff documents for every single project she managed. Not just basic notes, but detailed, exhaustive documentation. Every client contact with phone numbers and email addresses and preferred communication methods. Every ongoing issue with status updates and next steps. Every upcoming deadline with context and resources needed. She time-stamped everything, saved everything to 3 different locations, the company server, her personal cloud drive, and external hard drive. She made it bulletproof, made it impossible for anyone to claim she'd left anything undone or unprepared. James took a different approach. He compiled 5 years of performance data, showing the pattern clear as day. Manufactured crises, broken promises, exploitation dressed as dedication. He documented employee turnover rates, 45% annual turnover, 3 times the industry average. Sick leave usage, up 67% over 5 years. Stress-related hospitalizations, 3 employees in the past 2 years alone, all under 40. The human cost of Summit Solutions culture rendered in hard numbers that couldn't be argued with or dismissed. Priya finished every single marketing campaign ahead of schedule. She got client sign-offs on everything, kept every email with read receipts, sent completion confirmations with delivery confirmations. She created a paper trail so clear and irrefutable that no one could ever claim she'd abandoned her work or left clients hanging. And David, young, scared, determined David, organized every file, every system, every backup protocol with the thoroughness of someone who expected to be blamed for everything. He wrote step-by-step guides for every process he'd learned. He documented passwords and access points and vendor contacts. He made himself replaceable, because that was the only way he could prove he wasn't abandoning anything. But they didn't just prepare their work. They recruited. Quietly, carefully, in whispered conversations in stairwells where security cameras couldn't reach, in parking garages after dark, in carefully worded emails sent from personal accounts on personal phones that could never be traced back to company systems. They found allies in unexpected places. Lisa, a single mother of 2, ages 6 and 4, who hadn't been able to put her kids to bed in 6 months because she was always at the office until 10 p.m., sometimes later. Her ex-husband was threatening to sue for full custody, claiming her work schedule proved she was an unfit mother. He was right about her character, but right about her availability. The system was making his case for her. Michael, whose marriage was hanging by a thread so thin it might snap any day. His wife had stopped wearing her wedding ring 3 weeks ago. She told him last week, her voice flat and defeated, that she felt like a widow to a living husband, that she was tired of eating dinner alone, sleeping alone, living alone while technically married, that she didn't know if she could do this anymore. Sarah, whose younger brother was in the military, deploying to a conflict zone in January. This would be his last Christmas stateside for at least 2 years, possibly forever. They'd lost their parents when Sarah was 23 and her brother was 18. They only had each other, and Sarah had been told, in no uncertain terms, that her brother's deployment was not our problem and not a valid reason for time off. One by one, the group grew. People who had been suffering in silence, thinking they were alone, thinking they were the problem, thinking they were weak for struggling with what everyone else seemed to handle fine. But everyone else wasn't handling it fine. Everyone else was drowning too. They'd just gotten very good at drowning quietly. 12 people total by December 20th. 12 people who'd reached their breaking points. 12 people who'd made the calculation of the cost of resistance and the cost of submission and decided that submission was actually more expensive. Because staying cost them their families, their health, their humanity, their souls. And that was too high a price. They met in the break room at 3 a.m., December 20th, a time when even the most dedicated workaholics had usually gone home, when the security guard was doing his rounds on the other side of the building, when they could talk without being overheard or interrupted. 12 exhausted, angry, scared people who decided that enough was enough. Rachel stood at the head of the table, looking at faces she'd come to know well over these intense weeks. We all know why we're here. We all know what we're risking. So before we finalize anything, I need everyone to be absolutely sure. Really, truly sure. She looked at each person individually. If you have any doubt, any hesitation, leave now. No judgment, no hard feelings. We'll still be friends. We'll still support you. But once we do this, there's no going back. Once we send those emails, we're committed. No one moved. Not one person. 12 people who'd made their choice and were standing by it. Okay, Rachel said, her voice steady but spite the fear coursing through her veins. Then let's talk about exactly what happens on December 23rd at 5 p.m. They planned it like a military operation, because that's what it was, a coordinated action against a superior force, requiring precision and unity and absolute unity. The email would be identical for all 12 people, sent at exactly 5 p.m. on December 23rd, not a minute before, not a minute after. Simultaneous, coordinated, undeniable. James, the analyst, drafted the language. Professional, clear, legally sound, impossible to misinterpret. This email serves as formal notification that I will be unavailable for work from December 24th through January 1st for previously approved and subsequently canceled personal time. All assigned projects have been completed ahead of schedule. Comprehensive handoff documentation has been uploaded to specific location. Client satisfaction scores average specific number. All deliverables meet or exceed specifications. Per Section 4.2 of my employment contract, I am entitled to reasonable time off upon completion of assigned duties. I have fulfilled all obligations. I will return to the office on January 2nd. Regards, name. Attached to each email would be a comprehensive completion summary, pages and pages of documentation, proof of everything they claimed, evidence that couldn't be dismissed or denied. Rachel reviewed the email one last time on December 22nd. We're sure about the timing, 5 p.m. on the 23rd? Yes, James confirmed. Early enough that they'll see it before they leave for their own vacations, late enough that they can't do much about it immediately. And doing it together means they can't isolate and intimidate us one by one. Lisa added, and by the time they get back from their Christmas vacations in Aspen and the Bahamas, and wherever else they're going while we were supposed to be working, we'll have already had our time with our families. They can fire us after, but they can't take back those moments. Michael noted, even if we lose our jobs, we'll have Christmas, and that's the point. They all looked at each other. 12 people who'd become more than coworkers. They'd become comrades in arms, united by shared struggle and shared purpose. Priya spoke softly. Whatever happens, thank you, all of you, for making me feel like I'm not crazy, for showing me that this isn't normal and I don't have to accept it, for giving me the courage to choose my sister. David added, for showing me what it means to stand up, even when you're scared, especially when you're scared. Sarah smiled slightly. For reminding me that my brother matters more than their profits. One by one, they shared what this meant to them, why they were doing this, what they were fighting for. Not against Summit Solutions, really, against a system that had convinced them their lives didn't belong to them, against a culture that measured human worth in productivity and saw families as obstacles to profit, against the lie that you had to choose between surviving and living. Okay, Rachel said finally. Then we're doing this. December 23rd, 5 p.m. We send the emails, we go home, we spend Christmas with the people we love. And on January 2nd, we face whatever consequences come. Together, James added. Together, they all echoed. It was both a promise and a battle cry. December 23rd, 4:47 p.m. Rachel sat at her desk, staring at the email she'd composed. Her finger hovered over the send button. 13 minutes until they'd all agreed to send simultaneously. Around the office, 11 other people were doing the same thing, staring at screens, hands shaking, hearts pounding, knowing that in 13 minutes, everything would change. Rachel's mind was racing, second thoughts cascading like dominoes. What if she couldn't find another job? What if she got blacklisted from the industry? What if she couldn't pay rent next month? What if she couldn't buy food? What if she ended up homeless with an 8-year-old daughter depending on her? What if this was the biggest mistake of her life? Her phone buzzed. A text from Sophie sent from her grandmother's phone. "Mummy, are you really coming tomorrow? I know you said yes, but I'm scared to believe it. I don't want to get hurt again. But I'm practicing extra hard just in case you're really there. I love you." Rachel read that text 3 times. I don't want to get hurt again. 8 years old and already protecting herself from the people who were supposed to protect her. Already learning not to hope too much. Already building walls around her heart because the alternative, believing and being disappointed again, was too painful. Rachel looked at her computer screen, at the email that would either free her or destroy her. 4:52 p.m. 8 minutes. Another text, this one in the group chat with James, Priya, David, and the others. James, "My father called. He wanted to hear my voice. He said, 'I love you, son.' Just that. Like he knew. Like he was saying goodbye just in case." Priya, "My sister sent me a picture of her dress. She captioned it, 'Wish you could see this in person.' The saddest 3 words I've ever read." Lisa, "My kids made a Christmas countdown calendar. They're on day 23. Tomorrow they were supposed to cross off day 24 and then have Christmas with their mom for the first time in months. If I don't do this, I'll have to call them tonight and tell them I'm not coming. Again." Michael, "My wife is making my favorite dinner for tomorrow. She hasn't cooked for me in 6 months. She's trying. She's giving us one more chance. If I don't show up, she won't give me another." One by one, they reminded each other why they were doing this, what they stood to lose, what they stood to gain. 4:57 p.m. 3 minutes. Rachel's hands stopped shaking. She thought about Sophie standing on the stage, scanning the audience, finding her mother's face, knowing that this time, finally this time, her mother had chosen her. She thought about the note, "Do you still love me?" And she thought, "Yes, baby, I do, and I'm about to prove it." 4:59 p.m. 1 minute. Rachel's finger rested on the send button. Across the office, 11 other fingers rested on 11 other send buttons. 12 people, 12 decisions, 12 acts of courage that would ripple out in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The office clock hit 5 p.m. Rachel clicked send. 11 others clicked send. 12 emails shot through the digital void and landed in management's inboxes like bombs. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Rachel's computer chimed. An auto reply from Richard. "I'm currently out of the office on vacation and will return January 2nd. Another chime. An auto reply from Margaret. "I'm on holiday leave." They were already gone, already on their vacations, already with their families, while telling everyone else that family time was impossible. Rachel laughed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief and vindication. Her phone rang immediately, the office line, HR. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again, another number, management. Voicemail. Around the office, other phones were ringing. Other computers were chiming with urgent meeting invitations. Emergency meeting, all hands, conference room A, now. But this time, 12 people stood up, gathered their personal belongings, and walked toward the exit together. They didn't run. They walked calmly, with dignity, heads high. They'd done nothing wrong. They'd completed their work. They'd fulfilled their obligations. They were simply claiming what was rightfully theirs. As they passed other employees, people still at their desks, still working, still trapped, some looked angry. Some looked envious. Some looked inspired. One woman whispered as they passed, "I wish I was that brave." David heard her. He stopped and said simply, "You can be. Start documenting everything. Find your people. You're not as alone as you think." And then they were outside. The cold December air hit their faces like baptism, cleansing, transformative. They stood in the parking lot for a moment, just breathing, just existing in the reality of what they'd done. Rachel spoke first. "Well, we did it." "We did it," James echoed, disbelief and exhilaration mixing in his voice. Priya laughed, the sound genuine for the first time in weeks. "We actually did it. We stood up to them. We said no." Sarah added, "And the world didn't end." "The world didn't end," they all repeated, like a mantra, like a prayer, like a promise. They hugged each other. 12 people who'd become family in the trenches of shared struggle. Then they got in their cars and drove away, toward families, toward Christmas, toward the moments that mattered, away from the office that had claimed to own them. Behind them, the Summit Solutions building stood silent and imposing against the darkening sky. Inside, executives who were already on vacation would eventually read emails that would change everything. HR would scramble, lawyers would be consulted, threats would be made. But that was all in the future. Right now, in this moment, 12 people were free. And they were going home. And so the die is cast. The emails are sent. The walkout has happened. 12 people have chosen family over fear, presence over paychecks, humanity over exploitation. But the story isn't over, not by a long shot, because now comes the hardest part, actually being present for the moments they fought for, actually showing up, actually proving that this sacrifice was worth it. In part 2, we'll see the confrontation with management, the threats, the intimidation, the power plays. We'll see 12 people stand together in a conference room and defend their choice to be human beings with families and lives and dignity. And we'll see whether courage can stand up to institutional power. But before we get there, I want you to sit with what you've just heard. 12 people chose to risk everything. What would you risk? What would you sacrifice? What's your breaking point? And maybe more importantly, if 12 people in one company can stand together and say no, what could happen if more people did the same? What if this wasn't an isolated incident, but the beginning of something larger? Hold that thought, because part 2 is where everything comes to a head.